Dr. Kate Reynolds had been staring at the radar screen for 20 minutes straight, her coffee sitting forgotten on the desk beside her. The mug had gone completely cold, but she didn't notice. She couldn't look away from what the computer was showing her. Deep below the Arctic ice shelf, buried under 2 solid miles of frozen ground that hadn't been touched by sunlight in over 50,000 years, something was down there. Something big. Something that definitely shouldn't exist. "Ben, come look at this," she called out to her assistant. "I need you to run these numbers again. This has to be some kind of mistake." Ben Cooper hurried over from his workstation, his fingers already moving across the keyboard before he even sat down. He ran the scan 3 more times, checking and rechecking every calculation. Each time the results came back exactly the same. He looked up at Kate, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Kate, this isn't natural. Look at these readings. The shape is too symmetrical, too precise. Whatever is down there, someone built it." Kate felt her heart racing. In her 15 years as a geological researcher, she had never seen anything like this. The object was metallic, massive, and according to every test they could run, it had been sitting in the ice since before human civilization even existed. She reached for her phone with shaking hands. This was way above her pay grade. This was something the whole world needed to know about. Within 2 days, their quiet little research camp in the middle of nowhere had turned into something that looked like a small city. Scientists flew in from 12 different countries. Military helicopters brought soldiers and security personnel. Massive drilling machines arrived on cargo planes, along with enough equipment to dig through a mountain. The media was going crazy, even though nobody would tell them exactly what had been found. All anyone would say was that it was the most important archaeological discovery in human history. Kate found herself leading an international team of over 200 people. They worked non-stop 24 hours a day, taking turns in shifts. The drilling never stopped. The noise was constant. Everyone was running on coffee and adrenaline, desperate to see what was buried in the ice. 3 long weeks later, the drill finally broke through into an open space. The moment Kate heard the news, she grabbed her gear and rushed to the site. The ship was absolutely enormous. It stretched over 300 meters in length, roughly the size of an aircraft carrier. But it looked nothing like anything humans had ever built. The hull was made from some kind of dark metal that seemed to swallow light instead of reflecting it. The design was completely alien, with smooth flowing curves and strange angles that seemed to shift when you looked at them too long. Despite being frozen in ice for thousands of years, the surface was perfectly smooth. Not a single dent, scratch, or mark of damage anywhere. "We're going in today," Kate announced to her core team during the morning meeting. Her hands were trembling as she pulled on her heavy thermal suit, but she tried to keep her voice steady and confident. Next to her, Ben was checking his camera equipment for the 10th time, making sure everything was working perfectly. Their military escort, Captain Rick Walsh, quietly checked his weapon and secured it in his holster. Nobody knew what they would find inside. They climbed through the hole the drilling equipment had created in the ship's hull. The moment Kate stepped inside, lights began turning on automatically all around them. Soft emergency lighting flickered to life along the corridors, as if the ship had been waiting for someone to come back. The air inside was cold but not frozen. Everything looked untouched, pristine, like the crew had just stepped out for a moment and would be back any second. Kate's flashlight beam moved slowly across the walls, illuminating control panels covered in symbols that no human had ever seen before. Strange equipment lined the corridors. Then her light hit something that made her freeze in place. "Oh my God," Ben whispered beside her, his voice barely audible. Stretching out in front of them were rows and rows of crystal-clear pods, hundreds of them disappearing into the darkness ahead. Each pod glowed with a soft blue-white light, and inside each one was a person suspended in perfect stillness. But these weren't aliens. Kate moved closer to the nearest pod, her breath creating fog on its cold surface. Inside was a young woman, maybe in her early 20s. She wore primitive animal skins, and a necklace made of animal teeth hung around her neck. Her hands had thick calluses, the kind you get from years of hard manual work with stone tools. This woman was from the Stone Age. She had been living when woolly mammoths still walked the earth. And somehow she was here, perfectly preserved, inside an alien spaceship buried in Arctic ice. Dr. Tyler Bennett had been living in the research lab for 6 straight weeks. He barely slept anymore. His diet consisted entirely of coffee and whatever sandwiches people brought him. Dark circles hung under his eyes, and his clothes were wrinkled from sleeping at his desk. But he couldn't stop. As the world's top expert in computational linguistics, he'd been flown in from MIT the moment the alien ship's computer systems had powered up. Every university, every government wanted to know what was in those files. And now, at 3 in the morning, hunched over glowing alien screens in a freezing tent built around the excavation site, he'd finally broken through the encryption. "Amy, get in here right now," he shouted, his voice cracking with exhaustion and excitement. Dr. Amy Collins, the team's lead biologist, came running from the tent next door. She was still in her sleeping bag when she heard Tyler yelling. "What's wrong? What happened?" Tyler's face had gone completely white. His hands were shaking as he pointed at the screens surrounding him. "I got the translation program working. Amy, you need to see what's in these files. You need to see this right now." The computer monitors lit up with cascading information. Text in alien languages automatically converted to English. Video files began playing. Image after image loaded onto the screens. Amy pulled up a chair and started reading. With each passing minute, her expression changed from curiosity to horror. Her hands slowly moved up to cover her mouth. The alien species called themselves the Collectors. For more than 100,000 years, they had been traveling across the galaxy doing exactly what their name suggested. They collected intelligent life forms. But not species that had developed space travel or advanced technology. They specifically targeted what they called pre-sentient specimens. These were intelligent beings who hadn't yet figured out how to leave their own planets. Earth had been given a designation in their system, Reserve World 247. We were a hunting ground. They visited every few thousand years to take whatever they wanted. "They treated our ancestors exactly like we'd treat butterflies," Tyler said, his voice empty and hollow. "Look at this shipping manifest. It's just a list. Tribe locations. How many individuals they grabbed. It's just physical descriptions. They took entire families. Parents, children, everyone." Amy scrolled through file after file, her shock turning into pure rage. "These are research notes. Listen to this. Subject shows basic tool use capability. Specimen demonstrates social bonding with other captives. They were studying us like we were animals in a zoo. Like we were insects under a microscope." Tyler pulled up a three-dimensional star map that rotated slowly in the air above his desk. "It gets worse. See these coordinates? Each one marks another world. Dozens of them scattered across the section of the galaxy. And every single one is labeled as an active reserve. We weren't the only ones. They've been doing this to other species too." Nathan Price, their United Nations security liaison, walked into the tent at that moment. His military background made him hard to rattle, but even he looked disturbed. "Dr. Bennett, Dr. Collins, you both need to come with me. We found something in the captain's private quarters. Something you have to see with your own eyes." They followed Nathan deeper into the ship, past the chambers filled with sleeping humans in their crystal pods. They walked through corridors that became more decorated, more elaborate. Eventually they reached a section that looked completely different from the rest of the vessel. This area screamed wealth and luxury. The captain's personal quarters were huge, filled with strange furniture and exotic materials. But what dominated the room was a wall covered in trophies. Skulls from 100 different alien species lined the shelves. Weapons and tools from countless civilizations were mounted like artwork. And right in the center, given the place of highest honor, was a collection of primitive human items. Stone axes. Wooden spears with carved points. Bone knives with leather handles. The craftsmanship was beautiful. These tools had been made by skilled hands, by intelligent minds. And the aliens had displayed them like hunting trophies. They were proud of this, Amy whispered, her voice filled with disgust. We were just another prize to them. Another successful hunt to brag about. Nathan walked over to a console that was still glowing with power. This was running when we found the room. It appears to be some kind of personal log or diary entry. I need you to translate it. Tyler activated the translation program. A holographic image appeared in the center of the room. It showed a tall alien creature with long, thin limbs and eyes that had multiple facets like an insect. Its voice was strange, clicking and humming, but the computer converted the words into text they could read. Day 47 of Collection Mission 2891. The Earth specimens continue to be disappointingly docile and easy to manage. Unlike the Rigelian captures from our previous mission, these primitive humans show absolutely no resistance capability whatsoever. I am recommending to headquarters that we downgrade all security protocols for future Earth missions. These creatures show no intelligence markers beyond basic tool use. Analysis suggests this species is extremely unlikely to develop beyond their current primitive state. I have received confirmation from our homeworld that extended harvesting has been approved. We will return to Reserve World 247 in approximately 5,000 cycles for another collection operation. The three of them stood in silence, processing what they'd just heard. These aliens had looked at humanity and seen nothing but simple animals. They thought we were too stupid to ever pose a threat. They thought we'd never advance beyond banging rocks together. Amy's hands clenched into fists. They had no idea. They couldn't have known that in the time their ship was frozen in ice, we'd go from living in caves to splitting atoms. From stone tools to space stations. Tyler pulled up more files, his anger giving him renewed energy despite his exhaustion. According to the navigation records, they never sent anyone to look for this ship. Thousands of specimens on board, valuable research data, expensive equipment, and they just abandoned it. We weren't worth the effort to retrieve. Nathan checked his tablet, reading through military intelligence reports. The question is, are they still out there? Still collecting? Yes, Tyler said quietly, pointing at recent dated files in the database. These logs are time-stamped according to their calendar system. If I'm reading this correctly, their civilization is still active. Still operating. They're still out there, still hunting. Chief Engineer Danny Foster ran his hand slowly along the smooth alien metal wall, his engineering mind automatically cataloging every tiny detail he noticed. The material was unlike anything he'd ever touched before. It was cool to the touch, almost glass-like but clearly metal. Next to him, Rachel Hughes, the team's propulsion specialist, was practically bouncing on her feet with excitement. Her eyes were wide as she studied the intricate systems running through the ship's infrastructure. "Danny, are you seeing what I'm seeing here?" She pointed eagerly at the power conduit system running along the ceiling. Their whole power distribution setup is incredibly inefficient. They're basically using brute force to push energy through the entire ship instead of using smart routing systems. It's like watching someone use a sledgehammer when a regular hammer would work better. Danny nodded slowly, his brow furrowed in concentration. "Yeah, I noticed that too. Their technology is definitely advanced, light years ahead of us in some ways. But it's not elegant. It's not refined. It's like they built something that worked and then just never bothered to make it better. Like they never had any reason to optimize or improve anything." For the past 3 months, engineering teams from 15 different nations had been working around the clock, carefully taking apart and studying every single system on the alien vessel. They were reverse engineering everything they could find, from the smallest circuit to the largest engine component. What they discovered was both incredibly encouraging and deeply disturbing at the same time. Greg Palmer, their weapons analysis expert, came climbing up from a lower deck, slightly out of breath. His face was flushed with excitement. "You two need to get down to the armory right now. Seriously, drop everything and come see this." They followed Greg down 3 levels into the belly of the ship. The armory was massive, much bigger than any of them had expected. Row after row of weapons lined the walls, organized with military precision. But as they looked closer, they realized something strange. Every single weapon in this room had been designed for one specific purpose: capturing living creatures without killing them. "These are neural disruptors," Greg explained, carefully picking up a rifle-like weapon from a rack. The weapon was surprisingly light and balanced perfectly in his hands. "When you fire this at someone, it completely paralyzes their nervous system without causing any permanent damage. Over here," he walked to another section and gestured at a rack of strange spherical devices. "These create containment fields. Basically force field nets that trap whatever you shoot them at. And look at this collection. Stun grenades, tranquilizer darts loaded with different chemicals, even gas canisters that are specifically engineered for different planetary atmospheres. These are hunting weapons," Rachel said quietly, the realization hitting her hard. "Exactly right," Greg confirmed. "But here's where it gets really interesting." He activated a display screen built into the wall. "I've been running tests on all of these weapons for weeks now, firing them at our own military-grade armor. And guess what? Most of these alien weapons can't even penetrate modern ballistic protection that our soldiers wear. Their shielding technology is genuinely impressive, really advanced stuff. But their actual offensive capabilities? By our military standards, they're outdated. Some of this tech is less effective than weapons we built 20 years ago." Danny frowned, trying to make sense of what he was hearing. "How is that even possible?" "According to the ship's logs, these aliens have been traveling through space for over 100,000 years. They should be so far ahead of us that we can't even understand their technology." "I've been thinking about that," Greg said, leaning against the weapon rack. "And I think I figured it out. They've never had to fight an equal opponent. Not even once. Every single species they encounter is pre-industrial. Stone Age civilizations. Bronze Age at most. They've never needed to innovate or improve their weapons because they've never faced an enemy that could fight back effectively. Their entire military strategy is built around subduing primitive beings who have no real defense. The implications of what Greg was saying slowly settled over the three of them like a heavy blanket. The silence in the armory was thick with tension. So here's my question, Danny finally said. Can we replicate their technology? Can we build our own versions? Rachel's face broke into a wide grin. Better than that. We can improve it. Significantly. Their faster-than-light drives are based on a dimensional folding principle that our best physicists have been theorizing about for decades. But their actual implementation is crude and wasteful. Based on my calculations, they're probably running at maybe 40% efficiency at best. Give me 6 months and access to a proper laboratory, and I can redesign it to run at 75% efficiency. Maybe even higher. And their weapons? Greg patted the alien rifle affectionately. Powerful, sure, but they're completely single-purpose. Each weapon does exactly one thing and nothing else. We've already got engineers drafting plans for multi-mode adaptations. Weapons that can switch between different functions depending on what you need. Plus, their targeting systems are laughably outdated by our standards. No artificial intelligence assistance. No predictive algorithms. No smart tracking. They rely entirely on manual aiming. A trained human soldier with modern equipment would have a significant advantage. Danny pulled up the ship's technical specifications on his tablet computer, scrolling through pages of data. We need to present all of this to the United Nations Committee. But before we do that, I want to understand something. According to the database, this vessel was classified as a light collection craft. If this is what they consider a light ship, what do their heavy warships look like? Rachel had already pulled up those records. Her expression had gone serious. I found that information in the database yesterday. According to their fleet classifications, the collectors have 8 different ship classes ranging from scout vessels to heavy battle cruisers. The ship we found? It's third from the bottom of their ranking system. Their heavy cruisers are 15 times larger than this vessel. And they have thousands of them. Dr. Laura Mitchell stood in front of the medical monitors, her eyes fixed on the screens showing vital signs. Her hands were shaking slightly as she watched the blue light inside the stasis pod slowly begin to fade. Next to her, Paul Davidson, the team's lead anthropologist, was gripping his tablet computer so tightly that his knuckles had turned completely white. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a knife. Heart rate is starting to increase, called out the medical technician from his station across the room. Neural activity is spiking rapidly. Everyone stay alert. She's waking up right now. After 9 long months of careful preparation, countless simulations, and endless debates about whether they should even attempt this, they were finally doing the impossible. They were trying to revive a human being who had been frozen in suspended animation for 50,000 years. Nobody knew if it would work. Nobody knew if her mind would even function after being dormant for so long. The woman inside the pod suddenly gasped loudly, her chest heaving as her lungs pulled in air for the first time in millennia. Her eyes flew open, wide with terror and confusion. For several terrifying seconds, she thrashed violently against the pod's restraints, panic written clearly across her face. She was screaming, but no sound came out at first as her vocal cords struggled to remember how to work. Then her eyes found Laura's face and something incredible happened. Something passed between the two women in that moment, a connection that somehow bridged the enormous gap of time separating them. It was recognition. Not of faces or people, but of shared humanity. "It's okay," Laura said as softly and gently as she could, making sure to keep both her hands clearly visible and in a non-threatening position. "You're safe now. Nobody is going to hurt you. I promise you're safe." The woman couldn't understand the actual words Laura was speaking. The English language wouldn't exist for another 48,000 years after she'd been taken. But she understood something deeper than words. She understood the tone of Laura's voice. She understood the gentle expression on her face. Slowly, gradually, her panicked breathing began to steady. Her wild eyes stopped darting around the room. The tension in her muscles began to relax. Over the following weeks and months, they worked tirelessly to build a bridge of communication. Her name, pronounced as closely as modern human vocal cords could manage it, was Kira. She had been 23 years old when the aliens had taken her from her world. She had been a mother to 2 small children, a daughter and a son, both of whom she would never see again. That loss was written in every line of her face. Owen Blake, their linguistic specialist, spent hours every single day working with Kira. He used pictures, gestures, simple sounds, anything that might help build a connection between her ancient language and modern English. The process was incredibly slow and painstaking. But Kira turned out to be extraordinarily intelligent. She learned at a pace that shattered every record Owen had ever seen in language acquisition studies. Her mind was sharp and hungry for understanding. 3 months after her revival, Kira had learned enough English to finally tell them her story. The room was completely silent as everyone listened. "The sky demons came during the night," she said, her voice remarkably steady even though tears were streaming freely down her face. Laura made sure every single word was being recorded. "They flew in metal birds that made no sound at all. Just silence. Then light came down from the sky, strange light that trapped you, held you, lifted you up into the air. I saw my children below me reaching their little hands up toward me. I was reaching back down to them. But I couldn't touch them. I couldn't reach them." "How many people did they take from your tribe?" Paul asked very gently, not wanting to push her too hard. "From my tribe they took 20 people. But we weren't the first ones." The tribal elders told stories that had been passed down for generations. They said that every few generations, maybe once in a lifetime, the sky demons would come. They always took the young ones, the healthy ones, the strong ones. We thought we were being punished. We thought they were angry gods taking revenge on us for something we'd done wrong. "You weren't being punished," Laura said firmly. "You were being hunted. Like animals." Something changed in Kira's expression. Her eyes went hard, fierce, dangerous. It was jarring to see that look on the face of someone from such an ancient time. "Yes. We figured that out. On the metal bird, on their ship, we found others like us. People from different tribes, from different lands, speaking different languages. There was one man, his name was Kato. He was very clever. He watched the demons carefully. He learned their patterns, learned their routines." Owen leaned forward in his chair, fascinated. "What did he do?" "We were supposed to be stupid animals," Kira said, and there was fierce pride burning in her voice now. "The demons barely watched us at all. They thought we were like deer or rabbits, too dumb to be dangerous. But Kato found the weak places in their ship. Places where he could push stones and sharp rocks between the metal panels. He found where the demons controlled the ship's movement." Laura felt her breath catch in her throat. "The sabotage we found. That was your people? You fought back." "Kato and 12 others. They broke everything they could reach. Eventually the demons discovered what was happening. They killed Kato and the others with their light weapons. But the damage was already done. The ship started shaking violently. It was falling. And the demons? They abandoned us. They ran away in smaller ships and left us all to die in the darkness." 2 years of traveling faster than light through the darkness of space had finally brought the Defiance to a solar system that had never seen a human ship before. Admiral Victoria Hayes stood on the bridge of humanity's first true warship, her hands clasped behind her back as she watched the collector homeworld slowly grow larger on the main view screen in front of her. Despite everything she knew about these aliens, despite the anger burning in her chest, she had to admit one thing. Their world was absolutely beautiful. 3 massive moons, each one glowing with blue-green light, orbited a planet that looked like something from a dream. Golden continents stretched across its surface, separated by oceans that shimmered in shades of deep violet and purple. Cities covered the land below, sprawling metropolises that glittered like scattered diamonds. These were structures built by a species that had ruled this entire region of space unchallenged for over 100,000 years. They had never known defeat. They had never known fear. "Running full scans now, Admiral," reported Lieutenant Brandon Moore from the tactical station, his fingers moving rapidly across his console. "I'm reading 2,847 vessels currently in orbit around the planet. The majority appear to be civilian transport ships and collection vessels. I count 134 military escort ships, but they're all following pre-programmed patrol patterns. No defensive formations. No active alert status whatsoever. They don't see us as any kind of threat," said Commander Helen Price from the navigation station, shaking her head in disbelief. "Their sensor systems barely even registered our arrival. They probably think we're just another one of their own ships coming home." Kira stood next to Admiral Hayes, her weathered hands gripping the bridge railing tightly. In the 2 years she'd spent aboard the Defiance, traveling through the stars toward this moment, she had learned so much about the modern world. She could read now. She could write. She understood technology that would have seemed like pure magic to her tribe. But her eyes still carried the weight of ancient trauma, the pain of loss that no amount of time could fully heal. "Open a channel to their planet," Admiral Hayes ordered, her voice calm and steady. "Let's introduce ourselves." Timothy Ross, the communications officer, worked quickly at his station, fingers dancing across controls. Channel is open and broadcasting on all their frequencies, Admiral. They're receiving us now. Admiral Hayes took a deep breath, steadying herself. This was the transmission that humanity had spent 2 full years preparing. Every word had been carefully chosen. Every phrase had been debated by diplomats, military strategists, and linguists. This was humanity's announcement to the galaxy. This is Admiral Victoria Hayes of the Earth vessel Defiance. We represent humanity, species designation 247 from what you call Reserve World Earth. We're here today to return your property to you. The response came back within just a few minutes. A holographic image materialized in the center of the bridge, showing a tall alien creature with elongated limbs and multifaceted eyes that looked like cut gemstones. When the automatic translator converted its words into English, the tone was dripping with condescension and barely concealed annoyance. This transmission is impossible. Reserve World 247 specimens are classified as pre-sentient primitives. They lack the cognitive capacity for space travel or complex language. This must be some kind of automated distress signal from collection ship 2891. That vessel was reported lost over 50,000 cycles ago during a routine harvest mission. Your ship wasn't lost, Admiral Hayes replied, her voice taking on a harder edge. It crashed. It crashed on our world and spent 50,000 years buried in Arctic ice. We found it. We opened it. We studied everything inside. And we woke up your specimens. Would you like to meet one of them? She gestured to Kira, who stepped forward into the holographic projection field. The ancient woman stood tall and proud, meeting the alien's gaze without flinching. The alien's entire posture changed in an instant. It went from looking bored and bureaucratic to genuinely shocked, like a scientist who'd just seen something that shouldn't be possible. How did a primitive specimen achieve advanced language capacity? What modifications have you performed on it? What have you done? What we did to her, Admiral Hayes said, and her voice was now cold as ice, was give her 50,000 years to evolve. While your collection ship lay frozen and forgotten in our ice, humanity went through the greatest transformation in our history. We developed written language. We created mathematics and philosophy. We built agriculture and cities. We discovered science and engineering. We split the atom and reached for the stars. We went from being your hunting trophies to being your technological equals. And now we're standing in orbit above your homeworld. This is preposterous, the alien sputtered, its translator struggling to convey its disbelief. Reserve specimens lack the cognitive architecture necessary for. Here's what's going to happen now, Admiral Hayes interrupted, cutting off the alien's protests. You're going to release every single captured specimen from every reserve world you've ever harvested. You're going to provide them all with the means to safely return to their home planets. And you're going to permanently delete Earth and every other inhabited world from your collection databases. The hunting is over. Forever.